I'm going to tell my story, and there are many stories that I could tell because God has really shown up in a big way in my life in almost every aspect, from when I was a child to through my teenage years. He saved me from a lot of horrible situations, and He's blessed me in a lot of ways. But the story that I'm going to tell you today is our adoption story. Robert and I had been married for about 5 years, and we decided that it was time to think about children. And both of us, usually you don't start a family talking about adoption, but we just automatically started talking about how we felt God was leading us in that direction. About a year before that, one of Robert's former students, he was in the 7th grade, needed a place to live at the time, and so we opened our home to him. And he was in a pretty rough home life situation, and his grandmother basically just gave us the rights to be able to take him to the doctor and sign anything for him. And in that situation, during those months that we had him in our house, it really changed our life, and we knew that this was truly what God was wanting us to do, to bring a child into our home that needed a home. So Robert and I just started praying, and we prayed. We found out that we could take a class for foster to adopt, and so that's what we did. We thought about possibly adopting a child from the foster care systems. We went through the classes. We had our home study done, and we were just really excited about what God was leading us into. During that time, you start looking at pictures of children on photo listings on different websites, and that was probably one of the most overwhelming times, because if you ever go onto one of these websites, you will see literally thousands of children that need a home. And the majority are not babies or toddlers. Most of them are teenagers. And what we saw more than any other were young men, young African American men. And there are so many that we just felt like, why is this happening? Why are there so many? We both just started praying, are we supposed to adopt outside of our race? And both of us have always been very open to that. That wasn't really something that we had to sit down and discuss. It was just something that once we saw all of these pictures, we knew that there was a great need. A couple of months went by, and every day when we would come home from work, at the time we were working at 2 different schools, we would come home and I would be all excited. Okay, who did you find? And he would say, oh, well, let me show you the kids that I saw. But there was never a moment where we were like, this is who we're supposed to adopt, until one day. And we had been on the same exact website on the same exact day and came home, and I had printed off a picture and he had printed off a picture of Dontavius. And I was like, I've got to show you Dontavius. And he was like, I've got to show you Dontavius. It was the same child. We began praying over his picture, and the moment that I saw Tay's picture, I just had this overwhelming sense of peace that I truly felt like this is my son. And I know that might sound a little cuckoo, but I just truly, when I saw his picture, there was just this peace in my heart that I was supposed to specifically pray for him. When I mentioned that to Robert, he felt the same way. Everywhere that we could, we would put his picture, and when we would see it, we would say a prayer. And every night we would pray over his picture and just ask God to protect him wherever he is, and that we felt like God was preparing us to be his parents. The next step in that, you have to contact the social worker, and it was like the next day. I'm not a person with much patience, and so I immediately called his social worker in Tampa, Florida, And she told me that, oh my goodness, his date for review is in like 3 weeks. So send your home study immediately because we're going to make a decision in about 3 weeks. And so that was just a miracle, because almost always you wait for, you could wait for a year before you hear anything about an adoption. For whatever reason, God, just lined it up perfectly. And praying, we had everyone that we knew, even people that we really didn't know, we would ask them to pray for Dontavius. When Facebook was getting to be kind of popular, and we posted his picture on both of our pages and asked for people to pray for him. I really didn't know Monica at the time, other than we had both been on the same journey through the Emmaus walk for college students, and so I knew her that way, but I didn't really know her to like call her up. But we saw her on Facebook and we were like, you've got to start praying for this kid. And I'm sure she started asking other people to pray, and I mean, we had so many people just all throughout the country praying over this little boy. So no matter what, we knew that he was going to, whether it was us or not, although I knew it was going to be us, he was going to be in good hands. But it was during my planning period at work, and the phone rang, and it was a Tampa number. So I just, held my breath and thought, okay, let's do it. And it was Tay's social worker telling us that we had been chosen as his parents. I'm pretty sure I made a really loud noise. I'm having a baby, and he's 5 years old. And I immediately called Robert, and he thought that I was joking. I'm like, how can I joke about something like this? This is true. We are Dontavius's parents. And he was like, are you sure? Is there anything else that we need to do? And I was like, no, I mean, we've been chosen. It's us. That was just the most amazing feeling. It was kind of like what I would think that you would feel when you first find out that you're pregnant. But like I said, he was 5, so it was probably not quite like that. We were going to get to meet him in like 2 weeks from that point. So we scheduled the meeting in Tampa, and we were so excited. We just couldn't believe that we had been blessed in this way. So when we got to the office, we weren't expecting anything except to sit down and sign a bunch of papers. His social worker, Ann, said, well, are you ready to meet him? And we're like, yeah, let's go to the park. And she was like, no, he's here right now. And this older lady, who I just remember her being really tall, and she looks like a grandmother, and she walked out, and Tay was behind her skirt, and he kind of like, looked out from behind the skirt, and I just immediately fell in love. I mean, I knew I was in love with this child when I saw his picture, but then to see him in person, that was like, it was wonderful, I was a little hesitant at first, and then he just walked up to me, and he had a little Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle in one hand, and he held his hand up to me, and I picked him up, and it was love at first sight. Robert was just kind of in awe of how little he was. We knew he was 5, but he was so tiny. He looked like the size of maybe a 3-year-old. I mean, he was really super tiny, and the social worker was going through all of the different paperwork, and I have no clue what she said, because all I could do is just look at him and talk to him and smile at him and just, just the smell of him and just holding him and knowing that he was my child. Leaving that time, that was heartbreaking, because it's hard for a child to understand, especially he had been in and out of so many different foster homes. I know it had to have been so hard for him to understand that we were for real. We were truly going to be his parents. We weren't just these strangers coming to visit him. But we knew the next time that we would come, we would be bringing him home. So we just continued to pray, and we especially prayed during that time that God would just ease his little mind and let him know that part of his life not knowing what home meant or what family meant was going to be over soon, and that he would truly, we just prayed that God would just give him an understanding that even though that part of his life was ending, a wonderful new beginning was about to happen. And then we brought him home on the next visit, and just getting to know every little neat thing about him. I mean, he had so many different little quirks, as well as Robert and I, of course, have so many different quirks, and so he was getting to know our quirks, and we were getting to know his, and it was just beautiful. It really was. When you think about adoption, I know that a lot of people don't have happy stories, and they go through these years and years of trying to find a child, and but I believe that God blessed us in this way because we were willing, and we were just ready. We knew that no matter what, God was going to give us the child that was meant to be our child. And because we were open to adopting outside of our race, and adopting not just a baby, but a child that we didn't want him to become one of the young men that we would see on the website later on. And so adoption is a beautiful thing. It's in the Bible. We are all adopted. When we choose to allow Christ to be our Savior, He is adopting us. And so Tay is not alone in this story. We are all adopted. If you ever feel like that's something that God is leading you to, Robert and I would be more than happy to talk to any of you, because it's something that it's not for everyone, and the journey is not always easy. But if you are open and willing to just completely let God take control in that situation, you will be blessed beyond measure. And this is my story. Is it yours?